The wind carried dust and whispers across the dry western plains, a sound so familiar it could have been mistaken for silence. The sun bled over the ridges, turning the hills into copper and gold. Below them, the river glimmered faintly, the only streak of life in miles of parched land. That's where she slipped. Clara Morgan was 17, her dress faded and her boots nearly worn through, but her spirit was still young, untamed, like the wild horses that roamed beyond the ridge. Every morning, she fetched water from the river for her father, who'd been bedridden since the mine collapse. She always walked the narrow ridge that cut through the valley, even though the ground was loose and the stones crumbled underfoot. It was quicker, and time mattered when your father was thirsty and the sun burned high. That morning, she'd filled her tin pail and started up the ridge, her mind lost in thought. She didn't hear the rattle of pebbles behind her or notice how the path had shifted after last night's rain. Her boots slipped, the pail flew from her hand, tumbling into the dust. She cried out, her arms flailing as the world turned sideways. For a moment, there was nothing but the wind and the rush of her own heartbeat, until a hand caught her wrist. "Easy there, darlin'," a rough voice said above her. "Got you." She looked up and saw a stranger leaning from his saddle, the reins wound around one arm and his other hand gripping her tight. His horse snorted, hooves skidding on the edge, but the man didn't let go. With a pull and a grunt, he hauled her back to solid ground. Clara collapsed into the dirt, gasping for breath. The cowboy swung off his horse. He was tall, his face tanned from sun and years of riding, his jaw covered with stubble. His hat-shaded eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked older than her by a decade, maybe more, old enough to carry weariness but not old enough to have given up on the world. "You all right?" he asked, kneeling beside her. I think so," Clara said, brushing dirt from her skirt. "Thank you, I didn't hear you coming." "Most folks don't," he replied, glancing at his horse. "Name's Eli Carter, been riding through this country a long while. Didn't expect to find anyone up here near fallen off a cliff." She managed a nervous laugh. "It's quicker this way, I fetch water from the river every morning." He picked up the dented pail, handed it to her. "Looks like the river took more than a drink this time." Clara smiled faintly. "My father's sick, can't walk much, I have to do the chores myself." Eli studied her for a moment, then looked toward the distant shack half hidden in the scrub. "That your place down yonder?" She nodded. "Morgan Ranch. Well, what's left of it." He hesitated, then said softly, "Mind if I ride with you back? You look like you could use a hand." Clara wanted to refuse, out of pride or habit, but something in his tone, a kindness she hadn't heard in months, made her nod. They walked together, his horse trailing behind. The sun climbed higher, and the air shimmered with heat. As they neared the cabin, the sound of a cough carried through the open window. Clara hurried ahead and set the pail by the door. "Pa," she called gently, "I'm back. Brought some water." Her father's voice was hoarse. "You took long enough, girl." Then he noticed Eli standing behind her. "Who's this?" Eli tipped his hat. "Just a traveler, sir. Happened to be passin' by when your girl near took a tumble. Figured I'd see her home safe." The old man's eyes softened. "Well, thank you kindly. Ain't many good souls right in these parts anymore." Eli nodded. "Seems that way." Clara poured water into a cup and handed it to her father. His hands trembled as he drank. She watched him with quiet worry. After a moment, Eli cleared his throat. "You got anyone helping you around here?" "No," Clara said, "just us two. Since Ma passed, I've been keeping the place going. Pa was hurt in the mine last winter. Never healed right." Eli shifted uncomfortably. "That's a heavy load for one pair of hands." "I manage," she said, a touch of pride in her voice. He gave a small smile. "I can see that." He turned to leave, but the old man spoke again. "You ridin' far, mister?" "Not sure yet," Eli replied. "Just followin' the wind." "Well," the old man said, his voice weary but kind, "there's a barn out back. Roof leaks a bit, but you're welcome to rest there if you've got no place to go tonight." Eli glanced at Clara, then nodded. "I'd be obliged." That night, the western sky burned orange as the sun went down. Clara stood on the porch, watching Eli brush down his horse. She couldn't remember the last time anyone else had been there. It felt strange, and a little comforting, to hear another voice in the yard. Over the next days, Eli stayed on. He patched the barn roof, mended a fence, even helped draw water from the river. Clara's father took a liking to him, telling old stories by the fire at night. Clara listened quietly, watching Eli's face in the flicker of light. There was something in his eyes, something that spoke of loss. One evening, after her father had gone to bed, she found Eli sitting outside, whittling a piece of wood. The moonlight silvered his hands. "You don't talk much about where you're from," she said softly. He shrugged. "Ain't much to say. Used to have a small place out near Abilene. Got burned down when a gang rode through. Lost more than I could rebuild." "I'm sorry," she said. He nodded, staring into the dark. "It's all right. The past don't let go easy, but I reckon writin' keeps it quiet." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the crickets. Then Clara asked, "Will you stay long?" He hesitated. "I don't plan on lingerin' nowhere too long. But maybe a while. Feels good to fix something again." Over the next weeks, the ranch began to breathe again. Eli taught Clara how to mend saddles and fix a busted wheel. He took her riding across the open fields, where the grass swayed like waves. They'd talk for hours, about books she'd never read, places he'd seen. She'd laugh more than she had in months. But as the days passed, the thought of him leaving began to weigh heavy. She caught herself watching him from the window, the way the light fell across his shoulders when he worked. One afternoon, while gathering firewood, she asked quietly, "When the snows come, will you be gone by then?" He stopped shopping. "I don't rightly know, Clara. Folks like me were better at leavin' than stayin'." She looked down. "Maybe some folks just haven't had reason to stay." He didn't answer, but that night, he lingered longer by the fire, his gaze soft when it met hers. Winter crept in early that year. Frost coated the fence posts, and the mornings were still as glass. Clara's father's health worsened. Eli did what he could, fetching medicine from town, keeping the fire burning, but the old man's breath grew shallow. One night, as the wind howled outside, her father took her hand. "Clara," he whispered, "when I'm gone, don't let this place die. It's your home, and don't close your heart to kindness. It's rare in this world." Tears filled her eyes. "Don't talk like that, Pa." He smiled faintly. "Just promise me." She nodded through her tears. He passed quietly before dawn. Eli buried him beneath the oak behind the barn. Clara stood beside him, the cold biting her skin. When it was done, she turned away, her face hidden in her shawl. Eli laid a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I don't know what to do now." She whispered. "You keep livin'," he said. That's what he'd want. For weeks, they stayed on, both quiet in their grief. But something fragile and unspoken grew between them, a comfort, a kind of love that didn't need words. Spring brought color back to the plains. The river thawed, and the grass turned green again. One evening, Clara found Eli packing his saddle. "You're leavin'," she said, her voice trembling. He nodded. "I have to. I stayed longer than I meant to. Because of me." He looked at her, his eyes full of regret. "Because of everything. If I stay, I'll forget who I am. And maybe you'll forget who you are." "I don't care," she said. "You're the only good thing that's happened since Ma died. I can't lose you too." He took her hand. "Clara, you've got a home here, a life to build. I'm just a man passing through. But I'll remember you, always." She bit her lip, tears shining in the fading light. "Where will you go?" "Wherever the wind takes me," he said, smiling sadly. "Maybe someday, when I've found peace, I'll find my way back." He mounted his horse, tipped his hat. "You take care now." Clara watched him ride away until the dust swallowed him. The days that followed felt hollow. She tended the ranch alone, her heart aching with every sunset. But over time, the ache softened into memory. Years passed. The ranch grew green again. Clara became strong, self-reliant. Folks in town spoke of the Morgan girl who ran her place alone and never turned away a traveler in need. One late evening, as she sat on the porch, the wind stirred, gentle, familiar. A rider appeared on the ridge, silhouetted against the dying sun. Her breath caught as the horse descended the slope. The man dismounted slowly, his hair now touched with gray. "Evening, Clara," he said softly. She stood there, tears welling, unable to speak. "Didn't think you'd remember me," he said with a crooked smile. "I never forgot," she whispered. Eli stepped closer, removing his hat. "I came back, just like I said I would. Guess the wind finally blew me home." She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled through her tears. "Then maybe it's time you stopped riding." He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. The wind rustled the grass, the same wind that had once carried them apart now bringing them together again. Under the fading western sky, with the scent of dust and wildflowers in the air, the cowboy and the girl stood side by side, two souls who had found their way back through loss, time, and silence. And for the first time in years, the plains felt alive again.